I've been walking through some familiar Bible stories, not to replace them, not to throw them away, but just to slow them down enough to see if there's more there than we were taught to notice. So take what's helpful, leave what isn't, and just a quick pause before we go on. If what comes next feels uncomfortable or even threatening, remember, I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to pause long enough to ask, why is this bothering you? Because remember, certainty is the enemy of faith, not curiosity. So after Genesis tells us what happens to Lot's wife, the Bible goes quiet about her. She's unnamed, she's unmourned, she's left behind by the story. And then, centuries later, Jesus does something surprising. He brings her up, but not to shame her or explain her or even scare people straight. He simply says, remember Lot's wife. And yes, Jesus does go on to talk about urgency, about not turning back, about losing your life in order to save it. So it makes perfect sense that many of us assume she's being held up as the example of what not to do. But if Jesus wanted her to be a simple warning label, he had clearer and better options. He could have said, don't look back like Lot's wife, learn from her mistakes, or even don't hesitate. He doesn't say any of that. He simply says, remember her. And in scripture, remembrance is never passive. When God remembers, something always happens. Waters recede, chains break, futures reopen. Remembering isn't about replaying the past. It's about restoring what was almost lost. So maybe when Jesus says, remember Lot's wife, he's not denying the danger of looking back. Maybe he's refusing to let urgency turn her into a footnote. Jesus can warn people not to cling to what can't save them without pretending that leaving doesn't hurt. Warning and remembering aren't opposites here. They're held together. So perhaps Jesus isn't holding her up as the worst case scenario. Perhaps he's holding her in the story by refusing to let her disappear, interrupting the silence and not allowing her to be reduced to a moment of failure or absorbed into the background. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the deepest faithfulness here in this story isn't deciding whether she was right or wrong. Maybe it's choosing not to forget the people whose grief never got space, whose loss was too inconvenient for the story to slow down. And remembering her, maybe Jesus is teaching us something about God. That God does not rush past loss. That God does not forget the ones who get left behind. That God does not demand full emotion at the cost of our humanity. So maybe the invitation here isn't don't look back. Maybe it's don't forget, because faith at its best doesn't erase what hurts. It remembers. And also,